Hi, my name is Tina, and this is the first of several tutorials on Entrelac. This tutorial series will be chock full of information. I will cover the basics of Entrelac, how to set up your base triangles, and how to do each of the two different tiers, as well as the final tier to finish off your project. I chose this project to demonstrate this technique because it is small enough to be able to get through all tiers fairly quickly and large enough to really get the hang of Entrelac without being too overwhelming. For those of you who prefer to follow along on a written pattern, I have written up the instructions and they are available for purchase on Ravelry for $2. You do not need to purchase the pattern to follow along. I will provide everything you need to complete the projects within the videos that are to follow. However, in the written pattern, I will also provide simple instructions on how to create larger projects such as a stole, scarf, or cow. I did a quick search on Ravelry, and most of the Entrelac projects are labeled for medium difficulty. I personally don't like to label projects beginner, intermediate, advanced because I think anyone can do just about anything in knitting if they really want to take time to practice. And I do believe that most knitting techniques require some level of practice. Sure, you may not get exactly perfect results the first time around, but you can always try again. So don't let this or any other technique intimidate you. Jump in and give it a try. Knitting and most yarns are very forgiving, and if you don't like the result, you can always rip it out and start again. Short rows are a lot easier than you might think, and once you go through this series of tutorials, you will be an expert at Entrelac.
In this first set of videos, I'm going to focus on the stockinette base Entrelac and working with knitting backwards. Now, as I already mentioned, I have written up the pattern for both turning the work and knitting backwards. So if you prefer not to have to learn to knit backwards, I do have the pattern written up for turning the work at the, for each row. However, in this video, I am going to be doing the knitting backwards technique. And again, if you need more practice with the knitting backwards technique, you can always check out my tutorial on knitting backwards. Okay, so I am going to start with 24 stitches. And I have written the pattern for 24 stitches. However, you can do any multiple of 6. So if you wanted your washcloth to be, or your dishcloth to be a little bit larger, you could do 30 stitches or 36 stitches, whatever you decide. But I'm going to start with 24 because it just makes it a little quicker for the tutorial. So we're going to start with the base triangles, and we start with just knitting 1. And then we're going to purl 1, or in this case, because we're knitting backwards, we're going to knit backwards. Or you could turn the work and purl it. Then we are going to slip the stitch, and we're going to knit the next stitch. And then we're going to knit backwards. Now that quickly I did 4 rows. That was the first 4 rows of the first triangle. Here is row 5. I'm going to slip that stitch, and then I'm going to knit 2. Each time I'm going to add a stitch to the number. Then I'm going to knit backwards all of those stitches. And again, if you are not familiar with knitting backwards, you can check out my knitting backwards tutorial. I'm not going to go through the mechanics of knitting backwards in this tutorial, but you can check out my other tutorial. Then I'm going to slip the first stitch, and I'm going to knit 1, 2, 3, again adding an additional stitch. And we're going to continue in this fashion until we have 6 stitches on our right needle. So we're going to knit backwards here, and we're going to knit all the way across. And again, I'm still a little fiddly with the knitting backwards, especially on the first row. The first row is the hardest for me. Then we're going to slip that stitch, and we're going to knit 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we now have 5 stitches. We have 2 more rows to go. We have to knit backwards. And then we'll slip the first stitch again. And we will then knit 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we have 6 stitches on our right needle, and that completes the first base triangle. And now we are going to do exactly the same thing for the next triangle. So we're going to knit 1, just 1 stitch, and then we're going to knit backwards 1 stitch. Now, if it makes it easier for you, you could put a stitch marker there so that you know you can't go past that 1 stitch. You're just going to work on the next triangle. So you want to keep those 6 stitches on your needle. And like I said, if you want, you can put a stitch marker there to help remember that. Then we are going to slip this stitch and then knit 1. Okay, then we'll knit backwards. And again, we're not going to go past that 1. Once you get past the first couple rows, you're going to have a big enough gap here that you're not going to be tempted to go past there. We're going to slip that first stitch, and then we're going to knit 2. And we're going to knit backwards. And this yarn is kind of splitty, so I want to be careful not to split my yarn. The yarn I'm using here is a mercerized cotton. Then we are going to slip the first stitch, and we're going to knit 2, 3, adding an additional stitch. So now we have 4 stitches. We're going to knit backwards all 4 of those stitches. And again, we are going to slip the first stitch. This yarn is also kind of slippery. And then we're going to knit 4, adding an additional stitch. So now we have 5 stitches. We have 2 more rows here for this triangle. We're going to knit backwards. And we're going to slip the first stitch, and we're going to knit 5 stitches. And we have 2 more triangles to go. We should have 12 stitches over here. Let's just double check to make sure that we have all 12. Yep. So we're going to do exactly that same thing again. We're going to knit 1, and then knit backwards. And then, oops, we're going to slip this stitch, and then knit 1, and then knit those 2 stitches backwards. That didn't feel right, so I want to try that again. Okay. And then we're going to slip the first stitch again, and then knit 2, and then purl those stitches backwards. I'm sorry, knit those stitches backwards. It feels like a purl because we're going through the back, but it is a knit. And then we're going to slip that first stitch, and then knit 3, 1, 2, 3, and then knit backwards. Sorry if you hear my cat in the background. Sammy is getting pretty rambunctious today. Then we are going to slip that stitch, and then we're going to knit 1, 2, 3, 4, and we have 2 more rows. We're going to knit those backwards. And then we are going to slip the first stitch and then knit 5. 1, and now we have 6 stitches left over, and we're going to do one final triangle on this row. And it's going to be exactly the same again. Knit 1, knit backwards 1, slip the first stitch, knit 1, knit backwards 2, slip 1, knit 2, knit backwards, or turn and purl. Again, it's up to you. I am focusing on the knit backwards in this tutorial, but you can always turn and purl. Then we're going to slip the first stitch and then knit 4, purl backwards, or knit backwards, sorry. And then we are going to slip the first stitch. I like to, sometimes with this yarn it gets kind of slippery, so I want to make sure I tighten that up. And then knit 4. And you can usually tell when you've got to the base stitches. And then knit backwards. And slip the first stitch, and then knit across to the end. And now you have all of your base triangles completed. And if I lay them out, you will see they kind of look a little wonky right now, but they're all there. And there you have it. There are your base triangles. They are complete. Over the next few weeks, I will be sharing a tutorial to do the first tier. This tier we just finished is called the base tier of triangles, and then we will have a tutorial for the first tier, and then the second tier of triangles, and then lastly the final tier of triangles for this dishcloth. Those will be coming in the next few weeks. And also look for my tutorial on the magic knot, where I'm going to show you how to change your colors for each tier. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.
As always, thanks for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Please feel free to contact me with your comments or suggestions, as I am always trying to improve the show. You can find me on Ravelry, Instagram, and YouTube as Bloomingknitter. You can also find me on Plurk, Twitter, and Pinterest as Bloomingknitter, but I don't frequent those sites as often. I post show updates on Twitter and Facebook, and sometimes to Google+ and Plurk. I am Miss Aerobics on MyFitnessPal and Fitbit. You can always find all the old episodes as well as links to the tutorials on the blog at www.knittingblooms.com. And you can also follow the show on Facebook. You can email me at knittingblooms@gmail.com, and show notes can be found at knittingblooms.com.